Good afternoon. I'm very honored to be here. As I was introduced, my name is Fawad Yacoob. I currently serve as the president of a nonprofit civil rights organization called CARE. I wanted to begin my brief introductory remarks with the greeting in Islam in the Arabic language of Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May the peace and the blessings of God Almighty be with you. I'm very honored to be here this afternoon, and I'm looking forward. I was very inspired by that documentary. As was stated, I'm a middle school educator, so I've already put it on my mind that I'm going to bring it to my classroom next year. And then hearing the Reverend Casey, those were very inspiring remarks. I wanted to open my remarks with a verse from the Holy Quran, and I wanted to share it with you in the original Arabic, and then I'll translate it into English. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أتراكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. O mankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes, that you may know each other, not that you may despise each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of God is the one who is most righteous, and God has full knowledge and is well acquainted with all things. So as you can imagine, I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of Muslim Americans living in this country. And when you look at our history, it dates back very early. In fact, some research has shown that there were Muslims here even before the arrival of Columbus. And in fact, it's ironic because when you look at the history, you'll find that approximately 20% of the slaves that were brought here were of the Muslim faith. In fact, there's a very interesting documentary that was made a few years ago called Prince Among Slaves that documented the life of a Muslim prince as he was brought here in slavery, and it's really a remarkable documentary. Then you have waves of immigration of Muslims coming to this part of the world, most notably in the 20th century, 1940s, 50s, and 60s, from different parts of the world. And almost every 9 out of 10 times when you talk to that generation and said, you know, what was your decision that you made when you came here? And they will all tell you that when I came here, my intention was to get an education and then go back home. But what eventually happened is when they came here, everything they've heard about this country changed their mind, and they decided to stay. So they went for their higher degrees. If they were not married, they got married, and they came back and they started raising a family. Now you're going to see throughout my talk, I'm going to be fast forwarding. So I'm going to fast forward to September 11th, 2011, 9/11 as they call it. Probably the single most defining moment in the Muslim American community. Because what happened after that was parallel to what happened to the Japanese American community after Pearl Harbor. They were looked on with suspicion, they were looked on with fear, they were called the enemy. And for the next 5 years, there were varying degrees of what took place, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. Now, at that time, I was working as the administrator and youth coordinator at the Islamic Society of Orange County, one of the largest mosques in the country, perhaps the largest in the western United States. And I can tell you that what happened, because I was the one getting the calls, listening to the messages, and we had everything from, go home, you're gonna face some violence, to, and this is what the thing that really touched me, to our neighbors in the community who would specifically say, I am Christian, and say, if you need us to come and to protect you, we will do that. And they went even further. They said that if you have in your community people and families and women who are afraid to go out, we will go with them, and we will be their sisters. And that was just remarkable. So yeah, you can write, and people have written books about all the discrimination and hate crimes that happened, but it were these small stories that really define what happened there. So now if you fast forward to a decade later, today, what do we find? well, we find that this phenomenon of Islamophobia is really rampant, where there's this great fear of Muslims in this country. Muslims in the halls of Congress today. Muslims as your neighbors. Your children, okay? Our children. They're being bullied in school. There was an incident after what took place about a month and a half ago, where students were now being told, oh, I'm so sad for you. Why? What happened? Oh, we heard about your uncle Osama being killed. And these are really, they might sound like, you know, oh, just simple and kids are having fun, but it really has a deep ingrain on the development of those children. You have the normal bias and prejudice and discrimination, but then you also have hate crimes. In fact, the Orange County Human Relations, the last month, they had been conducting what's called listening sessions. They went to 2 different Sikh communities, and their advisors and their board of directors came, and they just wanted to listen. And then they came to 2 different mosques in the Orange County area just to listen, and you would not believe the stories that they heard. In fact, today, even comedians like to make light of flying Muslim, because it's funny when you have, you know, an infant child who's randomly chosen, you know, to be taken to the side, and their parents have to go. And you have these stories, too many to talk about. Now, I wanted to, as I close, is what are some of the critical issues that we need to look at? Number one, I think we really need to look at our history, because I just briefly shared with you, but you will see so much cross-section happening of our history, not back home, but right here. And we have to look at that, and we have to say, look, this is the commonalities. And these are the similarities, and we need to really emphasize those. In fact, when I talk about brothers and sisters from a Muslim perspective, it really applies to everybody. Because Muslims are brothers and sisters in faith, because as you know in Islam, there's a theme of people of the book, talking about Christians and Jews, but then you have brothers and sisters in humanity, because we're all coming from the same source. So that verse I talked to you about right there talks about this diversity, and you saw it early in the history of Islam, even in the cities of Mecca and Medina. And then you have the great example of Muslim Spain, Al-Andalus, where this diversity was there and this appreciation was there. So if I'm a Muslim student and you're the Christian scholar, okay, it didn't matter. I came to your feet and I wanted all the knowledge, and I wanted to grow as a student and become your mentor. We really need to tackle this issue of the other. As the Reverend said, all of us are immigrants to this land. All of us are immigrants to this land. So when you say, oh, you're the other, what are you really talking about? Or that phenomena of the enemy within. We have too many enemies in drugs and violence, you know, all of that, to be looking at each other as the enemy. And I think for young Muslim Americans growing up today, the lines are being blurred for them in terms of people attacking their identity as, well, are you really American, or are you Muslim, or is your allegiance to Al-Qaeda, or is it to some other group? So we need to look at our history, and then I always like to bring in the Constitution, because right after 9/11 you had so many constitutional lawyers talking about, well, you know, it seems that our Constitution was hijacked in the policies of our government, and we can't escape that. We can't escape that. And to conclude, the American Muslim community is very grateful to the histories and learning from those communities before us. African American, Asian American, Latino, Hispanic American, Native American. I mean, it's tough to talk about Native Americans because their history has almost been erased, you know, and it's not talked about in the schools and in the history books. So we're kind of the new kid on the block. So we are learning from your struggles, and we do need to work together. So again, I thank Renee for inviting us here and being here. I look forward to the comments of my panelists and the discussion that we'll have. Thank you very much.